Hi folks, robtran here. You know, there's been a lot of confusion about the bank bailout, and most recently the bailout of the auto industry. I'd like to help dispel this confusion, if I may. Manufacturing is not like the service industry, of which financial services and banking are a part. When a bank closes, the employees find jobs at other banks and customers take their money to another bank. When an investment service, retail or wholesale, goes belly up, the workers are hired by other service firms and the customers take their money elsewhere. Why? Because it is relatively easy to start up a new bank or other financial services company. It is not easy to start a new manufacturing concern. It's hugely expensive, even on the micro level of your local metal shop. The equipment, machinery, and infrastructure cost a fortune. Then there's the materials, and then, and only then, comes the advertising, the marketing, and the labor costs. Whereas a good financial analyst consultant can set up his or her business for the cost of a computer, software, and an internet connection. And that is pennies by comparison. Because of the above economic realities, the death of large manufacturing corporations can indeed be catastrophic and, in the case of the big three, will be catastrophic. I have no statistics to cite, but I believe it is reasonable to assume that General Motors, by itself, purchases an enormous amount of steel, aluminum, plastic, rubber, and glass every single month, if not every single week, if not every single day. Now, I think it's also safe to guess that many, if not most, of those suppliers are American. I'm also going to safely guess that GM, as well as Ford and Chrysler, make up a majority percentage of those suppliers' business. Take away the big three, and those suppliers collapse as well. Then the companies that supply them collapse until it reaches all the way down to the guy who works in the metal shop, making custom machine parts for any of the above. You know, as a quick segue, I always find it bracing how quickly some Americans are willing to throw away other Americans' jobs. And this is in reference to the big three and the whole controversy about unions and the greedy unions, you know, how dare they want to make a decent living. You know, it's really disgraceful and nothing we should be proud of, beating our chests and over our rugged individualism. Yeah. What rubbish. Really, rubbish. Now, regarding the bank bailout in September, no one with any expertise in economics or business was against the bailout per se. What most of them didn't like was the lack of transparency, oversight, accountability, and thick regulatory strings. But there was consensus on one thing. Without some kind of bailout, there would have been a credit freeze that would indeed have destroyed the economy at both the macro and micro levels. And the repercussions would have been immediate. How immediate? Allow me to explain. In this just-in-time world of ours, banks make critical microloans to businesses of all sizes every single day, week in and week out, as well as micro and macro loans to each other. These loans are often paid back in a matter of a few hours, whereupon the business gets yet another loan, or the bank, as the case may be. This is what is known as liquidity. Okay? So when you see that word used in this context, you'll know what it is being discussed. What is being discussed is the constant influx and outflux of cash between businesses and banks and banks and banks. The most common use for these loans are to cover payroll and to pay suppliers. With this in mind, you can imagine what would happen if banks suddenly stopped making these loans. Actually, you don't have to imagine. There have already been several instances of this, the most recent being the incident on December 6th in Chicago, where workers who got 3 days' notice that their factory was shutting its doors occupied the factory and said they wouldn't go home without assurances that they'd get their severance and vacation pay. Republic Windows and Doors, the company in question, failed to give the legally required 60 days' notice before shutting down because the company can't pay its 300 employees because its creditor, Bank of America, won't let them. Bank of America, which received $25 billion from the government's financial bailout package, stated that it is not responsible for Republic's financial obligations to its employees. Nice, huh? Now imagine that happening everywhere, all at once, over a period of, say, a week. There would be no food on the shelves of grocery stores because suppliers would refuse to ship merchandise for which the chains could not pay. Ditto restaurant suppliers, and truckers, and on, and on, and on. That is why the bailout was so crucial. What's wrong is that the details were bungled, not the bailout itself. Without that bailout, this country, indeed the world, would be in chaos right now. And frankly, folks, most of us would be starving. Sometimes, excuse me, sometimes these things are necessary. Sorry. You know, and I say this as a progressive leftist. I didn't like the idea of bailing out those people, handing them a fat check for all of their failures. But it had to be done because they had gotten us into such a mess that if we didn't bail them out, well, I've already told you. I hope this has helped a little bit. As a caveat, I, of course, am not an economic expert. I'm not an economist. I'm not a financier. Not that financiers have much cachet nowadays. But I do have a member of my family who is neck deep in this stuff and who's given me some very good explanations in real time back in September and October when all this was going down. And since that time, I've been doing a lot of research. Now, I understand that there is some kind of report from a commission convened at the University of Minnesota that claims that the entire bailout is a giant fraud and that it was never needed, there was never any trouble. That is simply bunk. Don't believe that. I mean, I don't know if somebody is misrepresenting what's in the report or the report itself is just pure propaganda, but just don't believe it. And if anyone, in the future, if anyone goes to you and says, you know, the bailout's a bunch of bullshit and the big three, screw them, that person you're dealing with is one of three things: ignorant, a liar, or a fool. No in between. Thanks for listening.